Okay. Welcome to everyone. Thanks a lot for being here. First of all, we'd like to thank our team inside IIM for giving us this opportunity to interact with the students and aspirants who are coming up for the next batch. And we'd like to congratulate all the aspirants who got a chance, who got the calls from IIM Indore, to be very frank. I'll introduce myself first. I'm Aditya Shankar. Before joining IIM Indore, I worked for 3 years with Reliance Industries Limited in the operations and planning department for the drilling division. I did my mechanical engineering from Jabalpur Engineering College. So before that, I've lived around the country. So that's in brief about me. Neha, would you like to go next?
I am Neha Chaudhary. I belong to Pune and I've completed my BTech in computer engineering from VIT Pune. And I joined IIM Indore as a fresher. Looking forward to sharing my experience with you all.
Hi, so I'll go ahead. So my name is Aditya Chowdhury. I did my BTech in chemical engineering from JU, Jadavpur. And after that, I spent 6 months with Honeywell in their field operations services department, which is basically the wing which looks into licensing the different technologies and how the technology is going to be transferred. And after 6-7 months, I joined IMI in the PGP program. And I'm looking forward to having a fulfilling discussion. So will it be good if I go ahead with my experience first? My IMI interview was pretty WorkX heavy. Not WorkX heavy per se, but it was based on my background a lot. So I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, but one of the panelists was a chemical engineer. And so the moment I said that I did my chemical engineering, he went completely into the industry side of things. First, it started off with, the different subjects that I had. So he asked me a lot of questions from chemistry per se. So it started off with what are polymers, and then it extended up to what is epoxy resin. And here I have a tip for all the aspirants that if you're not sure about something, it is better to say you're not sure about something than trying to bluff your way out of it, because they will know. They know what they're asking. So it went to a point where I wasn't able to answer the last question, and I said it that I'm not sure about it. So I wouldn't be able to answer that. So then he gave me the opportunity that, would you like to choose a subject and maybe I can ask you from there. So since I worked in the refining sector, I said that, let's talk about refining. So he started asking me about the oil industry in general, about the oil sector. What are, the challenges that the oil sector is facing, because like COVID was going on and oil prices had tanked, like crude oil prices had tanked throughout the world. And there were a lot of challenges. So he was like, what are those challenges? And how do you think the industry is going to respond to it? So there were a lot of questions from there. And there was one question in particular which caught me by surprise. So the question was that Honeywell was involved with another company in one of the cases with the European Commission. So do you know what that company was? It was a merger case. Do you know what that company was? So I fortunately knew the answer. It was General Electric, and it was one of the biggest mergers of the time. And he was, what he did was, once the question was done, once I said that about the merger, he, dived deep into it. But yeah, I was able to handle it. So my experience per se was more on the industry side of things, and which was completely based on the subjects I studied and the company I had worked with. So I'll pass it over to Shankar, and he can take it up.
Sure. So my interview experience, to be very frank, was somewhat balanced. I'd say I got the introduction, the WorkX, then also had this general awareness part as well. But I personally, IIM Indore's interview for me was not the one of the best that I had. I actually got one of my very core questions outrightly wrong. But then again, I don't know how I managed to justify my thinking on that topic, to be very frank. So how it started out was the introduction. I gave my introduction. I mean, I have a certain approach to my introduction where I leave markers for anyone to pick off from. So I know people can pick up from this point, and I know the questions that can come up with, so I'm ready for that. So but then people would not pick up from there, so I went on with my introduction for like a minute or so, to the point where I was trailing off. So from there, the person in front, fortunately, unfortunately, had some information about the oil and gas industry. So first he asked me about why did I change over from my undergrad, which was mechanical, to the oil and gas industry, and was it difficult? So we went on with that. He asked me a few typical questions about well testing and the weighing agents. The weighing agents question, which I basically got wrong. But although it was not exactly wrong, but then the exact name of the chemical was wrong, to be very frank. Then I had a question about mechanical undergrad, and then you have a maths question in IIM Indore as well. So once these were through, we had this general awareness thing. One pattern that I could see at that point of time was that the markets were booming, so everybody was talking about the markets. So I had a few questions about that, the economy, the Sensex rising up. About they asked me specific questions about the SEBI chief, who the RBI governor at that time. Then also the international trade things that were happening, like WTI and Brent crude, Suez Canal and all. We had that big event that happened that year. After that, we had the extempore. This is in brief how it was, but then I would not say this was one of the best interview that I gave, because I got a few answers wrong. But then it all boils down to your attitude, and then how you justify your sense point of view there. Neha, would you like to take next?
Yeah. So for Indore, even my interview was not the best, but yeah, it was pretty okay. It started off directly by the panelist asking me where I'm joining from, how the COVID situation is over there, like about the vaccines. It directly started with general awareness questions, like about the technical details of the different vaccines. Then it went on to GDP and general awareness things. Then they asked me which engineering I've completed. So the other panelist was a computer engineer, so we went into the technical details. He asked me about algorithms and other technical questions. And then it went on to, like, he just asked me which was my favorite subject in maths. So I said probability, and he asked me a very simple probability question. And then it again switched to general awareness, like about the UN, about Quad, about this what was happening in the Security Council at that time. So all of those kind of questions. And then in the end, I had my extempore. Yeah, so that was overall, it was for about, I think 10 to 15 minutes at the max. And it was fine, like not the best, but it went okay. So I managed all the questions.
So now that we've shared our personal interview experiences, Chaudhary, can I ask you how you took your introduction preparation, to be frank? I mean, to going in the background of what came up.
Yeah. So if you ask me, I, like you, have a template for the introduction where even I leave certain markers. Those markers are usually on like my entrepreneurial experience, my experience in the different PORs or the different leadership roles that I had in my grad, and on my hobbies. So these are the three areas that I try to talk about when I'm going in to the interview. But the strange thing about IIMI was they didn't take up anything from those. So I talked about my entrepreneurial experience, I talked about my hobbies, I talked about my work ex. They directly went to the academic side of things. So they just took the first line that I'm a chemical engineer with a BTech in chemical engineering. So they were like, let's start from there. And surprisingly enough, what they did was they asked me what my elective was. My elective in my undergrad was statistics. And statistics was the only area which I hadn't prepared that well, because I was like, there are so many other things in my resume, right? Why would they ask me from there? And that was kind of the Achilles heel when it came to things. They started like asking questions left and right from statistics, like in the quartile range, define this distribution, that distribution. And all of a sudden they were like, so like the number of barrels of oil, which is which is, distributed on a daily basis. What kind of distribution does that follow? And I was baffled at the question. I was like, I really don't know. So that was there. But like later on, I came to realize that they were picking up parts that I have said when I was, telling about myself, but they weren't doing it sequentially. So I think this is an attempt to, throw the candidate off. So they're expecting that this question is going to come because I said this sequentially, but they're like, no, I'll take this up later. And they did ask me a lot of questions from my entrepreneurial background. So they were like, so here in your resume, you have mentioned that you have a freelancing company. So tell me how you're operating, how you're, managing costs, who are you outsourcing to, what are your revenues like? Thankfully, since like I had all those details, so that part was fun. But a tip for the aspirants that, if you're going in, be very well versed with the kind of ACAT subjects that you had. I think this was a pattern which Niti also followed. So did SP Jain. And during the interview, they did ask from my academic subjects, and which is something that you should keep in mind. So over to Neha. I guess Neha would have something to add here.
Yeah, so as I said, my Indore interview didn't have any introduction. They directly started with general awareness. But all my other interviews did start with an introduction. I think they ask it so that just it makes us comfortable for the interview ahead, and also they look for what is important to us in our life, because we are summarizing our whole life in one or 1.5 minutes. So I think they look at what is important for us and what we are highlighting. So I think what we should go for is highlighting what has impacted us or shaped us during our life or time. So what I did was I just, first of all, the name, place I belong to, educational background. I also mentioned my family background in a sentence, the influence my parents had, my education has had, my internships, extracurriculars, all of these have had on me, which led me to choosing to do an MBA. And I ended it with my hobbies. So in all the interviews, that started with the introduction, I was asked follow-up questions. So either based on my hobbies or based on like what I talked about my family, how it has influenced me. So there were a lot of follow-up questions. So I think it is important to frame our introduction well, because questions from that will definitely come, because that is the first impression that the interviewers will have, and that is something they'll remember, whatever you say in your intro. So yeah, it is good to prepare it a little bit and make it like in a structured flow.
Yeah, that surely makes sense. I mean, you have to have a structure and all. The flow should be, I'd say the flow should be natural. Never actually mug up your introduction at any point of time in life. You shouldn't be cramming up your whole life to present to someone. You shouldn't have that position. For myself, I went in a reverse chronological order, saying what happened now first and then going back in time. Considering that I had a very work experience heavy profile. So the thing was that I had to ensure that what happened in my job was connected to where I was talking. So at IIM Indore, I had to talk about why the MBA program was complementing my work experience. So there, when I talked about it in my introduction, I left markers as in I did so and so in operations and the planning part. So I had to do management, this and that. So I want to learn this to get better at that. So in the introduction itself, when you start talking about your job, why I was doing things like that, and why I want to do it in the future as well. So there you connect things where I said I leave markers for questions to come up. But the frustrating thing was that it was never happening in any of the interviews. I mean, across the board, I had so many calls, but then none of them actually interrupted me in my introduction. So I had to go through my work ex, my college, the college life that I had, my PORs, then school, then the several places that I looked at, and then ending it with hobbies. And if still they did not ask me any question, I had to start talking about why I want to do an MBA. I mean, this is one question, one part of the introduction that you can leave as a backup, as in why you want to do an MBA is a question that you can start answering despite if they don't ask you before you end your introduction, if you're not cut across. So that was my approach to it. Again, I would say never cram it. The flow should be natural as much as possible. Don't worry about hesitating at any point of time. The thing is, you should be clear as to what you want to say, and as long as the message is proper, it does not matter so much. Uh, Next, we'd say, should we discuss about what kind of things we were asked? Like Aditya Chaudhary, you had chemical engineering coming up very frequently, right? For me, it was the work X part, like about even in the general awareness part, I was asked about the oil and gas industry, to be very frank, WTI crude, Brent crude, and then trading and so on. So you have to know the industry in and out. If you're working, you have to know not just the core of the industry, even the peripherals. Like manufacturing, if you're doing FMCG, you have to know the supply chain. You just can't be saying that I do only production, so I know the whole process of making a shampoo. It does not make sense. So back and forth, you have to know everything. I did not actually get so much about mechanical engineering, to be frank, from the UG side. But yeah, Neha, you want to talk about something from the academics?
Yeah, from academics, since I had no work ex, especially, I was asked computer engineering related questions in most of the interviews. So the questions are mostly about the core subjects like operating systems, DBMS, data structures, or the languages you've learned. Or it could be about trending technologies like ML, AI, cloud computing, everything that you must have read about or done in during engineering. So during my Indore interview, I was asked questions like which algorithm has made an impact in the field of computers, the best sorting algorithm, time complexity, where the log in the time complexity comes from. So you have to be prepared with all these basic subjects, at least the core subjects, at least two of them, so that if at all you feel that you're not comfortable with the question they have asked, you can say that, okay, I'm more comfortable with this subject. But if you do that, then you have to make sure that you answer the question that from the subject that you've mentioned. So in other interviews, I was asked about difference between C, C++, again about time complexity, pointers and arrays. So basics, but you have to be clear with the basics. In another interview, I was asked questions on the trending technologies like what is machine learning, what are its applications, disadvantages of cloud computing, how AI will affect jobs in the future. So all of those kind of questions, I think that is not something you can really prepare. That is something you come across in your everyday life when you're going through the subjects or reading news or things like that. So it's like something opinion. They are questions which have an opinion. You'll have an opinion about. So not something to prepare about in these things, but the core subjects are definitely something you have to prepare, because I think it shows how sincere you have been in your efforts throughout your engineering, and because that is also important ahead when you're doing an MBA. So that is what they're looking for. And as a fresher, you'll definitely have to prepare for these core subjects. Yeah.
Right. So I'll take it forward. Before that, we have a question in the chat. So the question is that how long does the interview last? So for me, it was around 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. I think it was the same for you guys as well, within that ballpark, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to answer the question, it was 15 to 20 minutes. Coming back to the technical question which I was asked. So I think if you have any kind of work-ex or any kind of internship that you have done during your UG, it is best to mention that, because they have a lot of follow-up questions from there. And if you're well versed with the work you have done, if you're well versed with the industry that you were in, it really helps if you drop them that marker. So in my case, my internship was also with Honeywell. I received a PPO from there and I worked there for 6 months. So, so what they did was the questions were entirely focused towards the sector. So I think one of the trickiest questions which I was asked was that explain the process of refining to a layman, explain the entire process. So it started from, like how the crude is distilled and how it goes through the different fractions. And during that time, he was actually prompting me because I was using a lot of technical terms. So he was like, a layman won't know this. So you'll have to make it simple. And it went on for quite some time. And towards the end, he was like, so the Vaseline that you use in your house, under what category would you say that this product lies? So I think that if you're good with 2 or 3 subjects, and if you know the nitty-gritty of it, and if you can guide the interviewer towards those subjects, even if the interview starts off with something else and you're like, I'm not comfortable with this, they will definitely give you the option that, tell me a subject which you're comfortable with. And if you're sure that you're really good in that subject, and if you tell them and if you can tackle all the questions, I think you're more or less through. Because I think that the most important thing that you can do is to be proficient, like really good in 2-3 subjects while knowing about the other subjects as well. I think they're looking towards a more generalist view of things with like being a specialist in certain areas that pertain to you, areas that you have worked with. Another question I think that came up was I had 4 internships that I had done during my grads. So he directly asked me that you have done 4 internships. One is in marketing, one is with a startup, one is with an oil and gas company. He was like, are you confused? And that question really took me by surprise. So I think the best way to answer these kinds of questions is to be very clear as to why you did what you did and connect it to how it is going to help you during your PGP course. So in my case, I said that I was experimenting with a lot of fields and I might not have figured out what I want to do, but I sure figured out what I don't want to do. And I think it is a very iterative process and you keep eliminating stuff until you find that one thing that you're really passionate about that you can spend a lifetime doing. So I'm not very rigid. I'm quite flexible when it comes to these choices. And I think that flexibility will also help me in my course. So over to you, Shankar. I think you may have faced a similar experience. If not with IIMI, then at least with the different calls that you had.
To be very frank, the academic part in my interviews, since I had so much work in between, so they always had this part that, do you have any specific subject we can ask you from? Because so I had one subject kept in, you have to know the basics of all subjects. It's not like I would just say that I want you to ask me this subject, because it does not work that way. So they asked me a question about entropy in this IIMI interview, and I gave the most basic possible answer, because one thing that you have to keep in mind is that not everyone sitting across the table knows technical things. So at any point of time, if you give an answer, make it as simple as possible, be it at IIMI or be it anywhere else. If it is a management interview, ensure that your answer is as layman lingo as possible, because they want to see how clear are you with your concepts and how clearly you can explain it to somebody else. So that's where it stems from. Other than that, one thing was the changeover. Since I had to change industries, that was there, but then that is a very personal question, and I'd say you take it up as per your perspective. There's one question that's come up for academics. Should we prepare the question listed on the internet or the subjects inclined topics in deep? See, personally, what I feel is that if you're a fresher, I'd say you should know your subjects very clearly. I mean, there should be some depth to your knowledge. But if you've done work for like, say, a year or more, they would not expect you to know so much. But then if you have been working in a very related industry, like say Neha was from CS and she was doing IT, if she had been doing IT, she would be asked very typical questions from say her work ex and connecting into the academics. So there you'll get mixed answers for this. Say some people say you need to have deep knowledge, but then that solely depends on you. If you're a very academically strong person, you can have it deep. But then the point is, the MBA interview does not need you to be so strong in academics, other than the marks part for sure. You have to have that to get the cutoff. Uh, After this, we have a small part in the across the IMI interviews that we have is a small maths question that we get. Personally, I got a simple maxima minima question that I had to solve, so I could do that. I don't see it to be very complicated, especially for WorkX people. But then I don't know how it gets. Neha, you have any inputs? I mean, how difficult can it get for freshers?
For me also, like I was asked probability in 3 of my interviews, but all of them were pretty simple. Like none of them were complex. It just tested the very basics, the thinking process, and sometimes you don't even have to get to the final answer. They just ask you what your approach is. So it's just very basic. But yeah, some people have been asked like to draw graphs and calculus and everything. So it's better to be prepared with everything, obviously, but it won't be very complex as far as I have seen.
Right. So even in my case, so they asked me a simple question from statistics. Despite all the theoretical, questions that they asked before that, the numerical was actually quite simple. So I think, yeah, as long as you're comfortable with basic mathematics, CAT level and whatever, prerequisites are there to solve the questions that you get in CAT, I think you are good to go. And I would like to add something to the question that we received before, that whether we should deep dive into our academics or, whether we should get questions from the internet. I think when it comes to CAT interviews, no two person has the same interview. I think that the entire job of the panel is to put you in a position where you're under pressure and they want to see how you respond to that, how you respond to questions and how you can think on your feet. So I think no two interviews are the same. So it's best that you look into your profile first. It's best that you look into your subjects first and you prepare from there before moving into questions on the internet. I think the questions on the internet are great if you want a background, if you want a template of how the questions are asked, how the interview proceeds. But when it comes to your own profile, you should focus more towards the subjects that you have studied. But this is my opinion on things. I think, Neha, if you have something else to add here.
Just one thing, that if at all the questions get complex, I think you can ask for time, and you can also ask permission to use pen and paper. So keep those things handy. Sometimes you will have to use a pen and paper. So just make sure that you do that. And other than that, I think for preparation, you won't have to prepare much for mathematics as such. It will be basic.
That is one good point you raised. I mean, never shy away from asking for 10-15 seconds from the interviewer. They won't say no to that. I mean, if you need time to think about an answer, if you think the answer is very tough, you need some time. I mean, don't ask for a minute or more than that. That does not make sense in a 15-minute interview. But then again, you have time to think. You can ask for 15-20 seconds to think of your answer. What comes next is the general awareness part of the interview. So for me, perhaps I'd say I was pretty strong at it. See, my preparation when it comes to general awareness is that if you've been following the news for the past 6 months, you're good to go. You don't actually have to go deep into history, or you want to study the world and so on and so forth. That does not make sense. And it's not actually possible. Nobody expects you to do that. But if you've been following the news for the past 6 months or more, you're pretty well set up to sit for any at least IIM Indore interview you can crack. But other interviews also, they don't expect you to know so much about the world. The basics are supposed to be there with you, so that when you talk to someone, at least you can talk about several events that are happening behind, and what are the reasons to those events, what are the repercussions that the world might face. Anything that you see on the news, you should have an opinion to it, because that is where the people will judge you as to what opinions you make and how you approach the problems that are being faced by the world. So for me personally, it was the market, the Sensex, and why were the FII is pumping so much money into the Indian markets. And the I was asked about the name of the SEBI chief. Since I couldn't tell that, they asked me about the RBI governor, so I could tell that. So it does not. I mean, on an overall perspective, don't get too hassled if you get an answer wrong. It's okay, it happens. The overall perspective should be that yes, this guy, this person is positive, we can think about taking him on board. Chaudhary, you have something on the general awareness side.
Right. So, in my case, what they did was, what they asked first is that, which newspaper do you read? And I think this is a question which has come up in my other interviews as well. So Niti, SP Jain, and all the other calls that I had, there were like in most of them, they asked that which newspaper do you read? And so in my case, it was Hindu. And then they went on to say that, do you know the name of the editor of Hindu? I think if you're mentioning a newspaper, just take this from my mistake because I didn't know the name. So if you're reading a newspaper, it's best to have, some certain pointers in your head. So who is the editor in chief, who are the very popular columnists, and maybe, just go through the paper of last day and just go through the different sections of it. Because sometimes what they do is they ask, can you tell me a recent news snippet that came up in the newspaper? So they do ask from that. And trust me when I say that they know what the answer is going to be. These people are avid readers. They know everything there is to know that regarding whatever they're asking. So I think other than that, in terms of general awareness, since I had mentioned about my entrepreneurial background, they asked a lot of questions regarding startups. So, the number of unicorns, who got recently funded. And so what they asked me was regarding Paytm. So they asked me, do you think it is a good business model? And regarding that, I had to speak on it. And other than that, they also asked a few questions regarding the startup culture in my hometown. So I'm from Bengal, and the startup culture is not very good here. So what they said was, can you tell me a few reasons why that's the case? And if so, how would you change it? So I think when it comes to general awareness, they're very tailored to your own profile, tailored to the kind of profile that you have, kind of resume you have. But it surely helps to be updated on the like the current affairs, the markets, and whatever the current state of things, and know a bit about the hometown that you're from, and also about the place you're applying to. So I have had friends. I have a friend with like 3 years of work ex with Microsoft, and he was expecting a question from the IT domain, but he kind of got a question about the speciality of Bhopal. So, like, be prepared a bit along those lines is what I would say. Neha, if you have something to add.
Yeah, so in general awareness, actually, I was not asked questions relevant to my profile or anything. They were like very random. At least in the Indore interview, it started with, of course, it's about everything that is happening currently, nothing like too much into history or anything. Even if it's history, it's related to something that's happening right now. So if you're reading a paper and something comes up about UN, so then you need to know a little more details about how it was formed or why it was formed and all those things. But otherwise, they won't just go randomly into history and ask you about random people like that. So I was asked about COVID vaccines, like how I would choose a vaccine for myself, the difference between the 2-3 vaccines that are available. Then they asked me about what is GDP, what was India's GDP growth rate. So all of these are things that you will know if you're reading the paper regularly. Other than that, I was asked about the Quad. So in this related to Quad, at that time, I think there was some conflict between China and how it was against the Quad and all of that. So they did ask my opinion on that. and I was not very I think it's important to have a balanced view, because if you're too strongly opinionated also, it might they might think that you're not open to both the sides or something like that. So I think you should have a balanced view, and obviously not you give a diplomatic answer, you give your side of the story, what you think about it, but keep it balanced, not too strong. That is what I would say. And yeah, other than that, then after that I was asked about UN, when it was established, uh, how the origin, why it was established, and was there any such body before World War II. So I had read about that, so I did know the answers. So and other than that, there was also something going on within the Security Council, so they asked me about that. And then they also went on to ask about how many members there are in the Security Council. This I didn't know, so it's okay to say that you don't know, you won't know everything. So it's okay to say that you don't remember or you don't know in such questions. So yeah, that was my overall experience with the Indore interview.
But yeah, saying don't know is okay for one question, two questions. We sure know that, but please, aspirants, don't overdo that at any point of time. Yes, one thing I forgot to mention about general awareness was that if you've lived in some place, if you've lived in, say, if you lived in West Bengal, if you've lived in Assam, you should know something about that place, because you should be expecting something about where you've lived. If you've lived in Mumbai, you should know about Mumbai, so on and so forth. So keep that in mind. Always have some facts, something unique about your place of origin. Keep that in the back of your mind, because you can get a question from that as well. So next, we had a question about the range of extempore topics that can come up. So we were about to go there only, discussing the extempore itself. So for me, the topic for extempore was, are digital transactions making it easy, but do they cause a problem in terms of transparency? Now, I don't know about the rest of the topics, but these topics are basically debate topics where you have to take one side, and you might choose to do both sides, say the positives and negatives of both sides, but then you have to be justifying your point of view. That's what, I don't know how factual the topics can get. Probably Chaudhary, if you have the something else.
Yeah, so in my case, the extempore was that, that in India, cricket as a sport is almost worshipped like a religion, but the other sports are quite neglected. So what is your opinion on this? Now, you need to know something about me, that I'm not much of a sports guy. Okay, the only sports I watch occasionally is football. So, but what I did was, before my interview, I did prep up on the current affairs or the general awareness that was going on in the world of sports. And I think this can serve as a good pointer, because as an aspirant, if you're aware of the sections you're weak in, you can always take those 2-3 months to prepare. And what I say always is, you can expect questions like this to come up. Just because you don't know it doesn't mean this kind of questions won't be asked. And in case of an extempore, you cannot say I don't know. That's going to go very badly. So
Aditya, you went on mute.
yeah, is this better? Yeah. So I think that the best approach in this case is to be very well aware of the weaknesses that you have, and prep during the 2-3 months that you get. Prep as a generalist, you don't need to know the name of all the players or how much funding that the BCCI receives or something. It's good to have a few pointers. Facts do support your statement, but even if you have a general idea of things, it helps. Neha, if you have something to add here.
My extempore topic was every child has a right to education. It was a very generic topic, but actually that was not a good thing for me, because there are so many things to say that I couldn't think of what to actually say next. So I think they gave us a minute or so to think about the topic. So I think you should have in mind a format in which you want to speak. I think that time is not very easy, because there are so many things going on in your mind. It is not even easy to think at that time. But yeah, you can do the best and like just don't repeat sentences. That did happen with me, but hope like I think the rest of the interview went okay, so this didn't affect it. But it's like you shouldn't repeat the same sentence in different ways multiple times. So that is something you need to remember. And yeah, I think extempore, I think there is some preparation that can be done. Like just pick out random topics and practice yourself maybe 2-3 times just to get comfortable with it. I think that is a good idea. Yeah, Aditya, if you
So
can.
what I can make out from the three of us, from the topics that three of us got, it does make sense to, if you're prepared for general awareness, you're prepared for extempore as well. The topic can range from generic to anything else. So it does not make a point to seriously be preparing for a very specific topic. But if you go through the internet, say the news just in particular, so it makes sense to just be there. Other than that, we had thought about, there are surprises that you can get in an interview, right? So in the IIM Indore interview, particularly, I did not get a very surprising question, but I had another interview, just to put it out, in IIM Koi Code. You get an very surprising HR type of question there. So the question that I got over there was like, I'll give you 5 animals, and you have to give me one quality of yours that matches each of them. So at that point of time, I got like an elephant, I got a dog, I got a cat, I got a horse, and I think the fifth one was a rat. So I was able to pull it off, thankfully. Um, I did say that one of those animals, I can't think of anything at this point of time, but I did say that there is something. But yeah, you will always have one surprise question that you should just keep your mind blank at that point of time, because you don't know what is coming. So the best preparation is that to stay calm. Who wants to go next?
Yeah, actually, even in my IMK interview, I was just randomly told the statement, "No one is crazy," and they were like, "Justify the statement." So actually, I'm into like I do read philosophical stuff and everything, so I could answer that. But yeah, that was kind of surprising because this is not something you will expect in an interview. And other than that, I think you'll also have some questions about yourself. Like I was asked in one interview, um, what is something that is not there in my form? It is a very common question, but yeah, I think it's you have to be honest, but it's good to have some idea of what you might want to say in such kind of questions. And other generic questions like why MBA, why MBA after engineering, why MBA right now without work X. So they might grill you on this one part, that why MBA as a fresher, because I was in one of my interviews asked a lot of times like why not after 2 years of work X or something like that. So you have to be convincing. You should know yourself why you want to do an MBA. So you not there's nothing you can prepare in this, but you have to be clear about what you want from MBA. So yeah.
Right. So in my case, across the board, I think there were quite a few surprises. And I think when it comes to surprises, SPJN kind of tops the list. If you have filled the form of SPJN, you'll see that there are a lot of questions, right? Like what qualities your friends will say you have, what qualities your parents would say you have, and like name 10 random things about yourself. So in that random things, I mentioned that I really like the color black. And so during my interview, they asked, why do you like the color black? I could have just gone with a simple, that it's my favorite color. But what they were doing was they were trying to look for like a deeper reason behind it. Uh, like the the point behind this question was to find out that if you're saying something random about yourself, does that also say something about you? So like Neha, even I'm uh, quite into philosophy. So I kind of backed it up with my like opinion on nihilism and all that. So that's what I did. But there will be surprising questions like this. HR questions you should prepare, like there are a lot of HR questions out there, and you should prepare as many of them as you can. Questions like why MBA, why do you want to shift from the oil and gas sector or whatever sector you're in. But when it comes to surprise questions, you cannot really prepare for these things, right? So it's very important to be honest with yourself. It's very important to stay calm, and it's completely okay to like take 25-30 seconds if you can frame your answer in a better way. Just don't blurt out the first thing that comes to your mind, because then it gets very difficult to defend yourself. If you don't have a plan of action in place, it gets very difficult to like maintain continuity, is what I have seen from one of the interviews that was really bad for me. So like just stay calm and think about what you're going to say, and think about the reason behind it, because they will come to the reason. It's never a question that they're asking just to know you. There is always something behind it that they want to extract out of you, and you cannot bluff your way out of it. So that's my sense on this.
Just before we wrap up, I don't know how relevant this question is. There was this, what is the extempore in an MBA interview? Just to give you an idea, the extempore is basically you get a topic, you get 30 seconds to prepare yourself, and you get a minute to talk about it. So that is what an extempore is. As we discussed, the topics could be anything, but if you have a general idea, that should be it. So there we have it, guys. I mean, I hope this session was fruitful. We tried our best to give you the best idea about our preparation, our experience, and whatever we could tell you, we told you. And I'd like to thank Inside IIM for giving us this opportunity to share our experience with the future aspirants and the people who are probably going to join us on campus as well. So yeah.
Just to add to things, all the best to everyone, preparing for their interviews. Just stay calm, stay positive, and things will be fine. Just hang in there, and it will be over soon. And all the best from the three of us. Thank you.